Leadership from the perspective of faith. That leader wears no crowns, has no gavel, no plush executive chair or desk in a spatial office, no podium, no pulpit. All a faith leader has is followers who desire to follow one who serves. Let me say that again. All a faith-based leader has is followers who desire to follow one who serves. We've explored that a faith-based leader is a person who of foresight, who has one foot in the present and the other foot in the future. We've explored that a faith-based leader is one who is persuasive without coercion. And we've explored that a faith-based leader is one who's committed to the faith of others. Now, this week we're adding a characteristic, and that is that a faith-based leader is one who heals. Now, whenever this characteristic is named, all kinds of thoughts and preconceived images must be addressed, but the primary one is healing from a faith perspective does not refer to one being medically cured. Healing from the faith perspective is being made whole. Healing from a faith perspective is not a finish line that can be crossed and therefore something can be achieved. Rather, healing is the ongoing journey, a search for that center or core of existence around which all of life revolves and from which all of life evolves. Healing is the process of discovering that center. I received a gift from a group of 7th and 8th graders a long time ago on a weekend retreat. We were struggling with what Christian faith looked like for a teenager. One of the youths in our discussion offered her definition of what we were probing that afternoon. And she said, I get it. Christian maturity is a person who has it all together. That's a favorite saying of youth in that age. That person's got it all together. A person who is a healer is one who is not split apart, not falling apart, not fragmented. And with that definition, they began talking about others who had it all together. This person seemingly had a core around which all their life revolved and from which everything in their life evolved. They talked about the cheerleader who was so kind to everyone they met, regardless of who they were. They talked about a peer who was the same person at the Friday night drinking party as they were in the classroom or in church. They talked about their favorite teacher who did not fall to pieces when her son died. They were all unanimous in that those are the people that they admired and willing to follow. The ones who had it all together. Now, John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, had a prevailing theme in his preaching and teaching that is a little bit more theologically sophisticated than the youth saying they've got it all together. But Wesley's theme described the journey of faith as a journey going on to perfection. Again, perfection was not being without sin. Rather, it was a quest to be made whole. It was a quest to have a center of one's life around which everything revolved and from which everything evolved. Now, that's a tremendous gift, this quality of being healed and being a healer. And the gift is, it offers dependability. We often hear the words described of the healer from the perspective of faith. You can depend on them. Why is a person deemed to be dependable? Because they have that center or core. It's always present in everything they say and everything they do. Simply stated, the characteristic of being a healer is dependability. You can always count on that core. And that core that person has is never going to let you down. But for the crucial question now, what is that core? I can best describe it by turning to our sacred texts and the hymns we sing. Again, we're identifying the core. It's interesting that healing is serving the plate of grace. Grace is that core of life around which all of life revolves and from which all of life evolves. That's interesting. Grace was not a word Jesus used to describe himself, but his grace was the word that his followers chose to describe Jesus. For indeed, at the beginning of the Gospel according to John, and from his fullness, the fullness of Jesus, the wholeness of Jesus, have we all received grace upon grace. That's the description of the life of Jesus. And then it's interesting that grace is used 125 times, but not found in the four Gospels of the life and teachings of Jesus. That was what Jesus was called, the person of grace. Didn't ever identify himself in this way. And then the followers of Jesus, listen to Paul in his last book to the Christians in Rome. Jesus Christ our Lord, through him we have received grace to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among all the nations. So grace is the word to describe Jesus, and grace is the word to describe the followers of Jesus. Grace upon grace. And then think of the hymns we sing. One of the hymns we sing is not that common, but listen to the 5th verse of Spirit of God. Spirit of God in all, we gladly hear your call, the life in our hands that sings, the power of your wings, born of your grace we rise. Love shining in our lives. That's the core. That's the center of the healing. But also in the hymn that we sing often, the first verse, "Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy, never ceasing, call for sounds of loudest praise." What's it all about? Tune my heart to sing thy grace. That's the core. Or indeed, another hymn that we sing, verse 4 of "Where he leads me, he will give me grace and glory. He will give me grace and glory. He will give me grace and glory and go with me all the way. Where he leads me, I will follow. I'll go with him all the way." And the way was the way of grace, the core. And of course, then the song that we sing more than any other, it's got a lot of verses, got a lot of history around it, but listen to verse 2 of Amazing Grace. "'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed." You see, the New Testament is full of grace in Jesus and the followers as the center of the life of the healer and the center of the life of the healers. And the hymns we sing represents that core. Yep, one of the characteristics of leadership from the perspective of faith is one who serves the plate of grace. Faith-based leaders have experienced radical acceptance from God, the God of love. And faith-based leaders are called and willingly pass this radical acceptance to all God's children. You see, faith-based leaders serve the plate of grace. They are healers. And in that healing, they're committed to the life of others as they care for themselves. For your thought and conversation, when in your own journey of faith did you begin to experience grace, radical acceptance of others as the core of your spiritual being? Another question: who are the faith-based leaders you have chosen to follow because in them you can depend on experiencing grace? And finally, what experiences have you observed of the gift of grace, radical acceptance, transforming human relationships? Thank you for being on the journey with us.